Afternoon, everybody. Sorry it's taken so long. I got embroiled in a conversation over there and realised I'd missed the time. But with a group kind of this size, I hope we can be interactive. So do interrupt me and ask questions if you want to. But I'll introduce myself first of all. My name's Gilly, Lacey. We've got our electric camper van outside that you may have seen. So I've got T-shirts and all the rest of the stuff, which my son Kit has done all the media kind of thing, and I'm come up with the technical side of things. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I'm just completing a PhD looking at the degradation of electric vehicle batteries, lithium-ion batteries, and the effect of using them in terms of V2G and smart grid systems, and what effect that does have on the batteries, and modelling predicted life using them in different ways. So I'm submitting my thesis on Tuesday, so this is absolutely the very end of this, and looks like I'll be working for a company once it's all sorted, looking at electrical storage, particularly second life batteries, which I'm thrilled about because it means I'm using what I've already done. So that's my background, electrical engineer, wanting to save the planet. But we're looking at second life batteries today because that's what Cara asked me to talk about. But I just wanted a little bit of a quiz first of all. What's that? The eclipse. Okay, it's not a moon like my husband thought it was. It's a picture of the eclipse from last week. And you might think, what on earth has that got to do with it? The electric companies, as you know, the eclipse was set to go over the whole of Northern Europe last week. And the forecast was that it was going to be pretty sunny. It wasn't great for us, was it? But across Germany particularly, it was very sunny. So the companies knew that this was going to happen, and they had to plan for the fact that the PV generation that was going to be happening in that area was going to be a problem. So, right across. So, particularly in southern Germany, there is a huge amount of PV. It's far more mature market than we have here, and they have a very large renewable market, a lot better than we have. And so they need to think about this idea. This is their predicted solar power. Now, one thing about solar is we don't necessarily have it in the daytime, we definitely don't have it at night. So they know they've going to have peaks like this. So these are daily peaks here. And this is what was going to happen. And you can probably see just a slight change in colour here. That's forecast. So after this peak, this is up in here, gigawatts of power being generated here. So you're roughly around about the 20 gigawatts in the daytime down to nothing at night. This is Friday when the eclipse was happening. So you can see that just before the eclipse at sort of 9:30 or so, then we've got, oh dear, that hasn't come out very well, has it? That was a lot clearer on mine.
And I was going to get problems as well with his,
with the colour.
With the colour, with the
yeah, well that was red, I think, yep, on mine. And now I can't even read what it says, but you can see what it was. It was about 13 gigawatts before the eclipse happened. It goes right down to 5.4 gigawatts during the eclipse, and then back up again to 20 gigawatts afterwards, all in the space of 2 hours. Now, that causes immense problems for the network, who are predicting the usual growth that they would have before, but they know it's going to happen. So one good thing about it, at least they knew it was going to happen, they could plan for it. And there was an article that said, German networks 1, Eclipse 0, like a football score, because they did run through it, there wasn't any problems, they had it all going. And what they did was that they got all their coal and gas generators on standby, on spinning reserve, ready to throw themselves into the network to make sure that the demand was met during that time. And they did it, and it was fine. But of course that means using a traditional power supply where you have your generator generating power, coal, gas, whatever it is down here, sending the power to wherever it's needed along the traditional networks. Wouldn't it be great So in that case, what happened was that what we would have usually used renewables, and because of the eclipse, how inconvenient, we ended up having to use a lot more fossil fuels than we would have done normally during that time. Now, rather than do that, wouldn't it have been better if we could have stored energy and used that stored energy instead, rather than have to rely on gas to fill in the gaps that the sun has left for us? We've got some problems with our network in the UK because of the way things are going. Because of climate change, because of the targets we're going to make, we've got 19 kilowatts of generating capacity is expected to close. So 19 gigawatts is expected to close before 2020. That's, if you remember on the graph, that's 20 gigawatts on the German graph was the peak of that. So, you know, it's a huge amount that's going. A total offshore wind farm should be up to 32 gigawatts, 25% of our UK capacity. But of course, that's wind farm potential, and the wind varies. We've got up to 5 million domestic PV installations, about 10 to 15 gigawatts, already expected to be up there by 2020. The problems with all of these things, they're intermittent, particularly the wind's intermittent, difficult to predict, again, particularly the wind, largely non-controllable, and also it depends on location. So offshore wind, you know, things that are in the prevailing westerly wind, you've got more. And of course with the solar in Germany, they put all the solar in the south where it's sunnier and put all the wind in the north where it's windier, and then have a mixture between the two. We have a similar position going on here, and you've got to try and sort all that sort of thing out. We've also got a problem because our spare electricity, because we're shutting power stations down, they're coming to the end of their life, the difference, the margin between how much energy we need and how much energy is available is coming right down. It could come right down to 2% this year, which sounds, well, that's not a problem. Well, it's generally more like 7 to 10%, and that means we've got to be a lot more savvy about how we use our electricity to make sure that we're going to keep the lights on. Smart meters will help, but I don't know if you know much about the smart meter network, but I'm not sure that the markets are up for it, really. They're not really trying too very hard to actually get smart meters working in a way that will mean that we can switch off non-essential demand if we need to. So our new future power networks, instead of being generators over here, loads over here, will be what we call a distributed network with all sorts of different things going on in different places. So you've got large systems at very large loads, very large generations over here. You've got sort of medium sized things, wind farms and so on in the middle. You may have large PV arrays. This is like the one on University in Northumbria, Newcastle. And then the lower loads at these ends. And all of these things are generators and loads all mixed in together. You've got reverse power flow in different directions. It's going to be more difficult to manage. The whole thing is known as what's called the smart grid. So we'd have to be a lot more smart about how we're using our electricity to cope with all of these different things. Why is it a problem? One of the reasons why it's a problem is that when you generate electricity generally in the old-fashioned way in which you would do it, maybe you'd have your generator over here, and at this side of a long line that may be many, many miles long, you'd have the load on this side. And in order to make sure the voltage is high enough at the load end, at the consumer end, then you need to make sure the voltage over here is much higher because you get a voltage drop across those lines. Now, if at this end, you not only have a load at this end, but if you have a generator at this end, PV or wind farm or something, then that's going to raise the voltage at this side, which is going to make the voltage over here even higher because you've already got a difference between the two. And if you raise one, you're going to have to raise the other as well. Can cause all sorts of problems with the transformers, with the voltage going outside the limits you're allowed to use, and all sorts of different issues like that. So if we can, ideally what we want to be able to do is to make sure that we use all the energy we've got. So if it's a windy, sunny day, we use the energy from the sun. That's fairly easy. More tricky at night times because we can have really windy nights, nobody's using any power. What are you going to do with it all? If we can store it, that would be the answer, wouldn't it? Just one more. Oh dear, that's not come out very well, is it? But this is quite just again, how much a demand might surge. This is from the World Cup in 1990. And I don't know if you remember the World Cup in 1990, but the England-Germany match went to penalties. So the electricity demand falls while people are watching the telly. Half time, surges back up again. Everybody puts the kettle on, has a cup of tea, then puts it back on and go watch the rest of the telly. There's another surge and a full time. Of course, they have a little break while they all decide who's going to. And then the extra time, there's another little beep then, but not much of one, because it doesn't take very long to decide who's going to kick the penalties. And then when they've finished, then they all put the kettle on in misery as we knocked out the World Cup again. All that, to a certain extent, can be predicted by the electricity generators because they know the match is going to be coming on. They don't know there's going to be extra time. They don't know there's going to be penalty shootout, but they've got to be ready to be able to match the supply with demand all the time. If you try and do that, what the traditional way of doing that is that you use a gas-powered station, you keep them on spinning reserve, so they're using sort of roughly 10% of their full capacity all the time, and then you can just tell them to switch on and they'll be on within seconds, which is obviously what you need. Batteries are ideal for that. Batteries, you switch them on and they're on, aren't they? You don't have to wait for them to warm up. You don't have to keep them spinning at using 10% of their capacity until they're ready to use. They just come on and they go off again. But the problem with batteries, of course, is they're expensive. As I know, because we've had to buy them for our van, but they are very expensive. But if 19% of our electricity last year is made by renewables, varying demand, if we can store some of that energy and use it when we want it, it will make a huge difference. Already starting to happen. This is a project by Northern PowerGrid called it's got the hyperbolic title, Customer-Led Network Revolution. And they have built storage at 3 different places in their area, in the Darlington area actually. This stage is I can't remember this capacity now. I think we're talking about 300 megavars of electricity in this case at this storage thing, and you can see the kind of scale of it. You've got steps up, you can walk through it, banks of batteries on either side, and you walk through the whole thing like container full. And this is just one. There's I think 4 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4 of these big like container sized things with all these batteries in. And the reason they've built these is because they want to see if it worked, but also to try, because it meant then that if they did that, they didn't have to replace the transformer. And the transformer itself was at the very edge of its power. Any more increase by more demand in the area would mean that they'd have to replace the transformer. They cost a lot of money, and it was made financial sense for them to do this instead. So they've done that in 3 places, and that's one of them. This is another company who have got a project called Everest, which I've found out about and hopefully working with in the future. And what they're trying to do is to try and get electric vehicle charging and storage and renewables all on the same site. So they've got electric vehicle batteries, second life electric vehicle batteries. They've got PV, they've got wind, they've got rapid chargers, they've got ordinary chargers and electric cars, putting all into one place. It's a pilot project at the minute, but there's a lot of interest in industry to see it be rolled out everywhere. What sort of storage are we talking about? We're talking about electric vehicles. Well, if you're thinking about just the electric vehicles themselves, as we use them now, Nissan Leaf or a BMW i3 or a Tesla, whatever it is, if you plug it in, then you can use the power storage now. You don't have to wait for a second life, so I'll just talk about that for a minute. So typically, you've got 5 to 15 kilowatt hour battery in a plug-in hybrid, and a bigger than that for a pure electric. And if you look at the statistics, you've got 34.5 million vehicles on the roads, 28.7 of them are cars. If they are looking at the ones that are not, that are proportion of diesel and alternative fuel vehicles are about a third, and there is 178,000 alternative fuel vehicles, including gas, electricity, or a combination, and they're increasing gradually over the last few years. If we assume that 10% of the existing vehicles become electric, with an average capacity of say 25 kilowatt hours, that's equivalent to 3.45 million EVs, and that means the total battery energy capacity is 86.25 gigawatt hours. So you remember what we were talking about before in gigawatts, 20 gigawatts was the power ratio, so that would be that much there would discharge in an hour, would discharge 86 gigawatts of power in that time. So that's a lot more than we need. Even if only 10% of them are actually connected and ready to use at any one time, we're still talking about 8 gigawatt hours of capacity in there. So there's a huge amount of potential, isn't there, to be able to use that for store.
Yeah.
The other way of looking at this is that electric vehicles are expensive. We all know that. Those of us who've got one, they cost a lot of money. And the major problem is that the battery itself costs probably half the price of the whole thing. That makes things really expensive. Also, we worry about charging infrastructure, but we do are concerned about the environment. There's government subsidies and one thing and another, but the total cost of ownership, TCO, nobody really knows yet, because we don't know what the second-hand value of the thing's going to be. If we can find a second-hand value for the battery, then once the battery runs out of warranty, the warranty is 5 years on a Nissan Leaf. If at the end of those 5 years the battery can be replaced in the vehicle carry on being used or whatever, that old battery can be used and has a residual price, has a value, then surely that's going to make a lot of sense for everybody. So if you have an electric vehicle, where's your potential areas of reduction? Well, you can reduce your manufacturing costs by all the different new batteries, efficiencies, all that kind of thing. We can reduce the charging costs by not charging for the charging infrastructure and so on. And the other thing we can do is think about extending battery life by reducing battery degradation, which is what I've been working on, and also redeployed used EV batteries for stationary applications, second life batteries. So we want to be able to do that by not only using electric vehicles to support the grid, but also being able to use them as second life batteries. This is an example of some modelling that we've done looking at a graph of how the network, the power in a network changes over a 24-hour period. So this is a network that contains the 2020 target for PV on a particular network, and normally it's a 2050 base case on here. So your power, you'd expect the voltage on this would then rise. Your 1 is your standard level, and your voltage will rise because you're generating PV, so it's already stay high, and it will go up and follow the lighter line down this way. So it's going right up to over 1.12 per unit voltage on here. That can cause all sorts of problems. If instead of doing that, you charge your electric vehicles during that time, effectively you're putting the power into your battery during that time, you can bring it right back down to 1 per unit during that time using the model we've been looking at. So, and of course, if you then mess around and charge them at different times, you could bring the whole lot flatter, but for less time. And so you can see how you could mess with it. But that's just thinking about charging them whilst the while the PV is being generated will make a big difference. In the same way, at the transformer, if you're generating a lot of PV, then your transformer, instead of sending power out to the consumer, is actually absorbing power, which means that the power then comes down below the line. It's negative, comes down below the line. If you then put some electric charging on there as well and store your energy, then it's not going to be quite so bad. The negative, you see it's down to -1 there. If you go down below that -1, you've got some real problems. By charging, you can bring it up. It's still reverse power flow, but it's not as bad using that system. So The other thing we can do with these things is actually use second life batteries, which is what I was asked to talk about. This is an example of a set of second life batteries that have been stacked in columns at a transformer at a substation. It's an American system, as you can probably tell by the DOE, Department of Energy, symbols on there. What are we looking at this? What we don't need to be concerned about now, we can use as many batteries as we want. We don't need to be too worried about how much space they take up, what the weight is, because they're now stationary. We're not worried about them being in vehicles. So if we added battery energy storage system, we'd be able to shave off those peaks on there and make a difference to the power flow through the network, as we just showed on the previous graphs. We'd be able to defer asset upgrade. So in other words, we don't need to upgrade our transformers and expensive power equipment so soon. We can leave that for a bit later. To work out how much battery capacity we need to think about how much battery will be left by the time they get to the required energy at the end of their second life. Now, you probably know that your batteries are considered to be the end of their EV life when they're 80% of their capacity. It's generally assumed that they'll be the end of their second life after 50%. So you've got between 80% and 50% that time when, as they get worse during that time, where you can use them for second life. So if you're using that figure, we keep them above 20% depth of discharge. Don't discharge them too far. Look after your batteries, keep them nice, to keep the cycle life as long as we possibly can. We'll need 493 kilowatt hours to shave off that peak, which is equivalent to, it's going to go off the end of my sheet, isn't it? Previous. Oh dear, it's right at the beginning. It's gone off the end. And I can't read it. I know what I'll do. I can just do end show just for a second and remind myself. No, it's still gone off the end. There. I don't know if you can read that. If we use that figure, then we'd need, say, 20. If we're using Nissan Leaf batteries at 24 kilowatt hour batteries, remembering that they are not that much anymore, they're 80% of that, and then at the end of that life, they're 50% of that, then we'd need 52 lots of those batteries on a typical, say, 500 kilowatt station. So that's the kind of size of battery we're talking about. Let's start on that one again. Okay, so is this all the battery has to look forward to? Its life gradually reduces as it gets older and older and older, and finally it goes off to battery heaven all by itself. Or is there another way in which we can make more use of these batteries? Various reasons why second life would be a better idea. There's value in it, so the battery is not dead at this stage, but we've got a second life and therefore a second set of money that we can use. And it's already been done. BMW have worked together with Bosch, the battery manufacturers, and Vattenfall, who are a supply company, a Swedish company actually, but they work in Germany as well. And they've got together, so they get the batteries out of there, which looks like a BMW i3 to me. Take the batteries out, separate out all the modules, get rid of the dodgy ones, and all the ones that are left, they recondition them, put them back into the battery module system and use them for second life batteries. That is already a pilot happening in Germany. This is a project, as I just mentioned before, the Everest project. This is in Norfolk. So they have a pile of second life batteries from Lotus inside this container, basically. They also have PV. I don't think wind's on the picture. They've got a rapid charger and about 6 regular chargers along there as well. And it's a pilot project looking at how you can, what's going to happen to the batteries and trying to get the whole thing working. But it works. You can drive up to this thing and use it. But it's out there in the system, and that's in this country, so that's already starting to happen here.
So is it tied to the grid, or is that off-grid?
It is tied to the grid as well. I think you can see. No, can't see. It is tied to the grid, but the idea is to try and, oh, that's only for emergencies. You're trying to get it to balance as much as you can before that. Nissan have recently said, well, they're going to give a second life battery, and they're going to actually pay for their second life batteries. So you can sell them back to Nissan at the end of their life, and they'll give you tuppence eight. No, I can't remember. I think it's about £1,000 for them, and they're going to repackage them if they can, turn them into something else. They can a second life, and then they can use them for either storage for renewables, wind, solar. They can repair original ones because you separate the modules back out, so you can repair the ones that are still supposedly within life and do that as well. And then eventually you salvage your raw materials by recycling. So it's reuse, refabricate, resell and recycle. We've all heard the reuse, renew, recycle, and they've just added a few more into that one. So that's Nissan that have just done that quite recently. So, in summary, what you need to do, you've got your batteries. They start off with 100% state of health. What can you do with them? Well, you can either put them straight into storage straight away and use them for battery storage, or you can put them into vehicles, and after they've been in the vehicles, then you can use them into second life batteries, and then from 80% of capacity down to 50% of capacity, and all the words have disappeared behind the pictures, as you can see. You can then, you've got another second life for those batteries. I think that's the end of that. Okay, so that's the plan. Any questions? Yes?
Start off with this one.
Yes?
For a battery to be big enough to support a community or an industrial complex,
Yes.
it'll have to be slightly bigger perhaps than the Everest container.
Sure, that's
Maybe
literally just for the rapid charger, really.
So, and you've touched on lithium ion, but what are the other likely battery types that will be used in those large-scale battery units?
The ones that are not second life, the ones that start with new life, they are lithium ion too. The ones in the Darlington project are lithium ion. They have the energy capacity, energy density, about 4 times lead acid, for instance. So although they're more expensive, they are just so much better. The other better thing about them is that they the self-discharge is very slow. So they keep their capacity on lithium ion much better than lead acid.
That's preferred. That's going to be the preferred mass storage.
Yes. Yeah.
So liquid metal and copper.
I think
all sorts of experimental things seem to be given a lot of welly at the moment to bring them forward. But do you think they'll never make it?
I think like what? Like what are you thinking of?
Well, there's a few there which, since I'm not a technician, I don't actually understand.
The lithium air. Well, lithium air is still lithium. It's just got a different cathode, anode. The flow cells and so on, and supercapacitors and all that kind of thing, can only really be used in tandem and in conjunction with the lithium ion, because they have either fantastic charging and discharging, very rapidly charging and discharging, but they don't actually have the capacity. So you need to use both together. I can't see any system, even in the pipeline, that's going to be as good as those things yet.
So you would plump for that at the moment. The old days of beta VHS and V2000, we had to decide where video would go.
Absolutely,
so
yes.
Bet on if you had to say where you thought it would go in 10 years' time.
Well, I think if we're thinking of second life, of course, then we've got those batteries as it is already. Not my problem. No, that's just VGA cable in there. Oh well. So we've got. We'll need that on, won't we, so someone else can use it. So I think I would go for lithium-ion EVs, because we've got. That's what there is out there. That's the chemistry of choice for almost everything at the moment. Batteries, laptops, everything. So I think you'd use those because that's what's available. And maybe by the time we've got to the end of our 50% capacity, then there may well be something else out there. And the beauty of these things, I think, is that you can use them in conjunction with one another. So you don't have to stick to one and then buy all your videotapes of one particular type and then find that no one else is making them anymore. But actually, you can run things together, like the guy downstairs who's got lead acid and lithium in the same vehicle. It can be done. Can anybody else see where the power supply is?
The question I may is to ask you, I'm not sure you know this, but there's talk about subsidies for battery storage, like the subsidies for renewable heat and food and tariff.
Right.
Are you hearing that there's to be support for storage? Are you hearing?
I've not heard that. No, I've not heard that. There may well be, I think, when the feed-in tariff comes to an end, because I think the feed-in tariff is gone down from 25 years to 20 years, hasn't it? Once that runs out.
Mass market.
Has it gone up?
It's gone.
Good.
Is there any reason why you've got to get rid of them at 50% capacity? Why couldn't you go right down to sort of 10?
There's no, well, 10 would be,
It's still storing power, isn't it?
yeah, I've had this debate a few times with people. I think one of the reasons is I think the capacity may well fall off a cliff. At the moment, it's pretty linear. It falls, the degradation seems to fall pretty steadily. But at some stage, we know, like with the regular capacity, it just drops very rapidly. And I suspect it might do that. And that would be a bit of a disaster, wouldn't it, if you put these things in and suddenly it just all doesn't work. Yeah. And I think also, as EVs become more popular, what you do is you replace the older cells with the newer ones, and it'll become a rolling programme, won't it, eventually?
There was a system I saw in Japan where you could plug your Nissan in and you could pull power out of it
Yes,
back into your own home system.
yes, good V2G system, yeah.
Can you do that over here? Or is that
You can't
just
yet, but
prototype thing?
there's no reason why you can't technically do that. But there's no incentive to do that at the moment. There's no incentive for the consumer to do that. Why should they? You know, they're not saying, you know, if you could use your power at... I mean, yes, you have cheap power at night, some of us, but a lot of the time we don't. And then, you know, what's the incentive for us to do that? But yes, it would make huge sense for the DNO to do that, because if they can level the demand coming out of people's homes, it makes life a lot easier for them, as we talked about before with the Eclipse and the World Cup. But they're not giving the incentives to people to do that at the moment. The challenge is to the DNOs to do that. Did you want to?
Building structure then, don't they? They need
Absolutely.
to make peak demand electricity 10 times the cost of off-peak, and you'll overcharge your car knowing that you're going to give 10% of it away and it'll pay for the 9% you put in.
Absolutely. And then the fact that your car costs, you know, so much more than another car, if you're getting an income back from doing that, or at least cheaper electricity, that makes sense, doesn't it?
Are they on with the grid to create this?
Well, I mean, I get my electricity from Ecotricity, name and shame. And the reason I did that was because it's green electrons. But I heard that they had an EV car tariff. I thought, oh, good. They just give you a flat rate once a year, 40 quid a year. Well, what sort of incentive is that? It's not really any incentive at all to use anything. I just thought that's a bit poor. They could do a lot better than that.
Seems to me to incentive, like, to balance the grid where it's sunny and you've got EV connected. It seems sensible to incentivise that at places of commerce and industry where people are going to be driving their cars too. You know, offices, don't focus on domestic. Focus on...
That's right. And if they put that together as a package for an industry and said, look, we'll give you the charging points, we'll do this and do that and the other thing for you. There's an incentive for people. At the moment, there's not that incentive out there, even though it would actually make life more easier for the DNOs. They're not really pushing that, I don't think. They could do a lot more than they are. I don't see that it's up to the consumer to do that. Well, I mean, a lot of us do that anyway. I think, oh well, just charge the car while it's sunny because that's good. But that's only because I'm feeling magnanimous. It doesn't actually help me financially at all. Anybody else asking? No, nobody over there. Go on, what's you then?
Has the effort been made with packaging? Because you sort of spoke there about repackaging. It strikes me that that's a cost they could certainly reduce. Because if you take like a Nissan Leaf pack, if we were to disassemble one of them and make it into something that's relatively difficult, if we were to take something like a Tesla pack that's got a round cylindrical commonplace cell, that's going to be cheaper to do that. And surely if they standardise the footprint or incentivise the manufacturer's standardised footprint, that's going to reduce it.
Absolutely. But then that comes back to the whole battery swapping debacle that you've probably heard about, where we're trying to get everybody to use the same size, shape, voltage batteries so we can swap them. That would be perfect, but it didn't work.
Because manufacturers are going to see you're going to reduce the technical development, but within the pack, there'll always come a denominator of this thing, couldn't it?
It could, yeah. But everybody, I mean, there's different manufacturers out there. It's the way it works, doesn't it? Different manufacturers. Tesla, you probably know, Elon Musk has decided to build his own batteries rather than rely on somebody else, and other people are outsourcing, building their own rather than Nissan are doing the same rather than try and outsource it all, because they're not getting to get exactly what they want, and that's just going to make diversity greater, isn't it, rather than less?
Well, they wanted exclusive, weren't they? So you can't put a Tesla battery in a Leaf.
Yes.
You've got to go and buy it from Tesla.
Yeah, or the battery manufacturers, the independent battery manufacturers, there's nothing to stop them selling to the different people. So if they have their own factories.
Samsung make batteries for everybody, why don't Samsung make one footprint? And then because they've got a repackaged solution that's cheaper, they'll actually be the market leaders second life, second time around.
Yeah.
But there's definitely an opportunity there, business opportunity there, I'm sure, if somebody's got that. Do you want?
What about the bottlenecks on lithium, like actually with raw material?
I don't think it's it's not like nickel, cadmium and all that. I mean, first of all, it's not poisonous. Secondly, it is pretty abundant. The cost is not the raw materials, it's the problem of making the electrodes robust enough, because the lithium, as the lithium changes from charging to discharging, this molecule physically changes size, gets much larger, about 4 times the size. So your problem is getting that to cope with the fact that it gets larger and smaller again in the same pack. And that's why often phone batteries are soft, because of that change in volume. And as it's doing that, what happens is that the electrodes get stress cracking and they break down. That's the problem with them. And it's not a chemical problem, it's a mechanical problem.
So Dyson's looking at these new solid-state batteries. Do you think there's any hope in those?
Yeah, I think there's all sorts of people working on things, and they need to sort this out. I'm being angered at behind on the other side. I'm sorry.
Just a very quick one.
Go on then, one more.
Yeah, in your slide, you just mentioned there's expected to be 5 million rooftop domestic PV by 2020.
By 22, yes.
Is it 20 or 2050?
2020.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, that would be terrific.
Yes.
It's only 500,000.
Yeah.
The target to have 2 million by last year has not been met.
No.
And I think
But we've got better with wind than we thought, so.
Perhaps I think 5 million might not be doable.
Yeah. Well, no, but we have to have targets, because we're definitely not going to meet them if we don't have any. Yes. All right. Thank you very much. Sorry, I've gone over.